Okay, everybody, I really did it. This is Fran Lewis, and this is MJ Network in memory of my sister, Marcia Joyce, and Dr. Cavuto is here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because I have the bio right there. I have to tell you that at the end of the stream, I downloaded and I've been getting hundreds of views on my streams. I don't know why people are listening, but they're listening.
Yes.
Dr. Cavuto is enjoying the fifth decade as an educator. He has successfully supported the literacy acquisition of literally thousands of students, including me. As reading teacher, reading consultant, literacy coach, and literacy supervisor, has also facilitated the professional development of teachers and administrators as an invited literacy seminar workshop leader, professor of literacy education, and presenter, keynote speaker at innumerable local, state, national literacy conferences. Dr. Cavuto is the author of several literacy texts and programs. He holds a PhD in reading literacy with a specialization in psycholinguistics. Not bad. Now,
Thank you.
I did that very well. I rehearsed and everything. Don't
Well,
worry.
you're one of my star former students, so I expected no less, Fran.
So, when we first talked about focusing on phonics,
Hmm.
today discussion we started with prediction, background knowledge, two key parts of processing, print of reading. Why are those so important? And I know as an educator, a lot of teachers don't know how to teach phonics.
Hmm.
They have absolutely no idea. Plus, I have, if you need me to read any definitions, I've got them. So, what is the best way to start to teach phonics? And I mean, I've got 1,000 definitions here. It says, what is phonics? Analogy phonics, how is phonics taught, synthetic phonics. What's the right way to start? I could read every definition, it's not going to get anywhere.
Okay, Fran, if I may, I think that an, a kind of a prerequisite to even talking about phonics is very quickly talk about two things that a fellow named Hawkins writes in his book Intelligence and more recently Thousands of Brains, and he talks about intelligence is made up of two components: prediction and background knowledge. Prediction and background knowledge, critical important for intelligence. And because he says those two things, that that tells us that that's a good, I think, lead into phonics. That tells us that prediction, which a lot of times in literature you'll hear people say, or more recently in this science of reading, no, we don't teach kids to guess. Well, guess what? Guessing is critically important. Guessing gets us through life. Every moment
Mm-hmm.
of the day we're guessing. So let me just say that I am not anti-phonics. English is a phonetic language, not perfectly phonetic, but it is phonetic, and hence it needs to be taught. The question is, how do you teach it? We'll talk about that in 2 minutes. But to to say that when students read, they shouldn't be encouraged to guess, that's nonsense. Now, I'm going to replace the word guess with hypothesis testing. Ah,
Mm-hmm.
students are constantly, we hypothesize every moment of our life. Well, guess what's coming next? As you're listening to me now, you're not listening to every sound I make or whatever. You can actually guess the next word I'm going to say before I even say it, because our heads are built to engage in prediction. So, having said that, phonics, in my view, why are we having these reading wars in this country? How do you teach? Do you teach phonics? Do you teach whole word? I think it's a ridiculous battle, as it were. Gene Shaw called it the reading wars, the great debate. Uh, phonics has to be taught. The problem is, how do you teach it? And the problem is also, unfortunately, English has 26 letters, which are called, as you know, graphemes, and 44 sounds, phonemes. Hence, many words in English do not sound out. It doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
if you're Frankie phonics, Granny phonics, hooked on phonics, driven by phonics, you can't sound out literally 40% of
Got
the
them all.
right now. So getting back to your question, but so having said that, you must teach phonics. How is it that you clearly said there are three distinct ways of teaching phonics. You can teach phonics in a rule-based fashion, right? With one syllable word, you have a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. The vowel will be short, which does not say its name. Think about a 5-year-old hearing that. Think about a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old hearing that. All right, a word is an abstraction. You talk about a vowel, that's a further abstraction. You talk about short or long, that's phonic rules are deceptively simple. By the way, we have 200 in English, 200 phonic rules, and most of them, the majority do not work more than 50% of the time. So I'm going to cross that one out. Let's not do that. The second way is letter by letter phonics. Letter by letter phonics is saying a sound for each of the letters. So in the word cat, you would say k, a, t. Okay, not too bad. K, a, t, cat. Not bad. But what about carpet? K, r, t. Hmm, not so easy to integrate that. That's right. Uh, and if, when you start getting a little bit longer words like carpenter,
Mhm.
no good. So we're left with, in my not just opinion, I've worked with thousands of kids who had reading problems, and once we started doing a cluster-based approach to phonics, letter clusters. Let me do that a different way. K R car, p n enter,
Mhm.
carpenter. Now you only have three integrations as opposed to seven. Huh? That, in my view, we should be doing cluster-based phonics. Way back when, I had a professor at Adelphi University named Jerry Glass, and he came up with a technique called glass analysis. It's a real kind of conditioned approach, but the good thing was Jerry Glass came up with, he analyzed the language. He paid people a lot of money to analyze the language. He came up with, I think, 100 or 200 distinct clusters. And you teach each cluster, no rules, you teach each cluster. The first one is at. Why? Because that's probably the most frequent cluster in English words. And you go through it and you get all the at word. And the word cat, what letter says ka? And the word at, well, and you're holding up a card to the youngster. What letters say at? All right. And what sound does letter C? What sound does letter A? What sound do letters A, T make? Put it together. It's glass analysis for perceptual conditioning. Brad, I'm a huge fan. I would never do it exactly that way. That's super structured glass analysis. However, having said that, I modified it. In fact, Jerry Glass was a lovely man. He really was. He's no longer with us. But when I finished my PhD, he invited me back to his graduate classes to lecture. And I told him, I said, Jerry, I'm going to have to tell him strict glass analysis is problematic. And he said, yeah, oh, okay, okay. He had this interesting way of talking. But cluster phonics, friend, in my view, that's the way we should be teaching phonics. Clustering, clustering, clustering. Did I answer that question about how do we teach it? And you mentioned a lot of definitions, but in my view,
Yeah.
phonics is nothing more than letter sound relationships. Letter sound relationships. They're different from phonemic awareness.
Uh-huh.
Phonemic awareness has, especially in the science of reading, they're very big on phonemic awareness. And that's okay, that's fine. But phonemic awareness is one's knowledge of the sounds of spoken language. Spoken language. And in my view, the best way to become uh, proficient at phonemic awareness, you don't need workbooks, you don't need the computer. The best way is by listening when you're 2, 3, 4, and your parents read to you, hopefully. Listen and make sure the parents are reading poetry. Huh? The trouble with the kid is that eventually it becomes a cat. Here's thing one, here's thing two. I wonder what they're going to do. Huh? Phonemic awareness is wonderfully developed by listening to the poetry. And, or you could even play little games. I'm thinking of a word. It sounds like soon. It's up in the sky. It's called and the kid has to jump in and say moon. I did this hundreds of times with my own children just to keep them busy in the car. But what was I doing? I didn't even know I was doing it. And I was in the middle of a doctoral degree at the time. What you're doing is you're developing their phonemic awareness and knowledge of the sounds of spoken language. Right? Now, just two things, and you're going to jump in, I'm sure. and I hope you do. But two things, there are two parts of phonemic awareness. Number one, three parts actually. There's the phonemic um, integration. That's Joey. I'm going to say three sounds. I want you to listen to see if you can put this together for me. K, a, ch. And if he says atch, he was able to phonemically integrate those.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Uh, how about this one? S, oft, er, softer. He was integrated. By the way, if I say cut at, and he looks me straight in the eyes at 5 or 6 years old and says, "Oh, tack, hmm," and I say, "Let's try another one, it," and he looks me straight in the eye, eh, tip. You see what he's doing? That's a total transmogrification, a total reversal. As much as I am absolutely anti-labels, this is a youngster who very well has difficulty with directionality in terms of perceptual processing. Okay, that's a youngster who may in fact be dyslexic. That's an unbelievable sign of dyslexia. That's total reversal. Number three, phonemic awareness technique is what I find this one interesting. Phonemic segmentation. That's
Yeah.
I give you a word, uh, um, basket. Can you tell me each of the individual sounds that make up basket? Let's even get easier, friend. Tap. What are the three sounds that make up tap? So we're going to break up the word into its constituent sounds. In my view, that's an incredibly difficult task. I've tried that with hundreds, if not more than that, of classrooms made up of teachers, and most of the teachers had a difficult time. If the teachers have a difficult time segmenting words into sounds, why are we asking kids to do it? Let's throw that one away. But phonemic integration and that also phonemic manipulation. If I have tap and I put an M in front of it, what's the word then? Can you say m? Can you say that word tap but with the M in the front? That's you're manipulating with the. Those are the three phonemic awareness techniques, and the one I think is actually the best is learning. Your ear becomes attuned to the sounds of language best through listening to poetry, things that rhyme. And it's a wonderful way. So, if phonemic awareness is a prerequisite to learning phonics, and you should be starting at 2, 3, 4. By the time they get to school, they already have developed an ear for the sounds of language, which will help them learn phonics.
The problem is though, so I figured this out bigly. When I taught first grade, I was taught in the first grade, and I was told to do Bank Street,
Uh huh.
Bank Street,
Yeah, I remember.
yeah, by sound, but not by sound, by sight. And of course, I never taught first grade. I taught sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the first graders that they were no longer in first grade; they were in sixth grade. They were going to learn how to read that day,
Uh
the
huh.
first day. And I mean, I had no idea what I was doing, and I put the words on the board. Whatever I did, by the end of the day, they were reading the first book.
Yeah.
They said, "How did you do that?" I said, "Because you're not in the first grade; you're in sixth grade." But I was told not to use phonics. Of course, I threw it in myself because I don't listen to anybody. The best phonics series is not the one they're using now, the science of reading, which I think is a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And my niece is learning how to do blah, 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 blah,
Uh-huh.
was Lippincott.
Yeah.
If you have to, at least it was like R, am, group sounds. It wasn't like individual sound.
Exactly. But that's precisely what I was talking about when I said clustering, right?
Yeah,
Now, now,
yeah,
now again, one of the in the science of reading, we could do a whole segment on that another time. We could talk,
yeah,
but there's some aspects that are irrefutable as part of that. Let's call it a philosophy. Okay, that philosophy of reading, the science of reading. Uh, uh, but when they start talking about and this I couldn't believe because I've read several articles in professional journals and I've listened to podcasts about the science of reading. When they start talking about taking we don't do the three queuing systems. We don't believe
uh-huh.
in the three queuing systems. And in fact, in some states in the Midwest, friend, you're not going to believe this. But in some states in the Midwest, they're banning they're teaching the three cueing systems.
Uh huh.
I find that absolutely. I shake my head, but I shake it more than that. That is absolutely ridiculous. There are three language cueing systems embedded in all meaningful language: the graphophonic, the semantic, and the syntactic.
That's right.
Those three are there as long as we give children meaningful context. Now, if we give children a sight word card, huh? A sight word card, and sight word cards have been around forever and they're still around. The problem with sight word cards is you're giving them a word in isolation. So the only cue that they can use is the graphophonic. That's fine. But what about if the word is you on the card?
Uh huh.
The word is could, or the word is father. And the parent holds it up, and the kid looks at it and says, "Yeah, no, I can't." All right, honey. And the parent, friend, come on. How many parents do you know who is going to say, "That's okay, sweetheart, no problem. Sound it out." Now, friend, without trying to be terribly disrespectful, in the best of worlds, the kid might say, "Hey, you sound it out, friend. I'm just teasing. You doesn't sound out. You doesn't. Yeah, yeah, but instead, the kid doesn't realize that mom or dad is unintentionally giving him or her an impossible task. He starts to internalize the idea that, hey, this reading thing is really hard. If we, I'm not anti. In fact, one of my teachers at reading center I owned for 38 years uh, uh, ended up in one of my graduate classes. And Dr. Cavuto, I know at your reading center, the teacher sent home flashcards, and now you're kind of poo-pooing flashcards. It's a little bit disingenuous. I said, hey, I don't get it. I said, not at all. Did I tell you there should be a risk-free environment in my class? Let me respond to you. Of those flashcards that the teacher sent home at my office, they look like regular. Yeah, they're on index cards. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah, yeah. On the back of it, there's the sentence. Oh, there's a sentence. Yeah, like if the word is mother, it might say, I came home from work. My mother was home. Or my mother was home, but my father wasn't. If the kid can't get the word mother on the front of the word, on the front of the card immediately, give him 2 seconds. He's not going to get it by sounding. It doesn't sound out. Let him flip it over and let him use the semantic cues to try to figure
Mm-hmm.
it out. Yeah. So cyber cards are fine as long as you put a meaningful sentence on the back of them. That's why in the whole language movement, I was never a proponent of word walls, putting words on walls because
That's next. Yeah.
yeah, because words on walls. The whole idea was in, if I may, in Orton Gillingham, they call them banded words or X words because they don't sound out. What they're talking about are phonetically inconsistent words. Friend, you put them on the wall. You put them. I don't know. I don't want to be ridiculous here, but you put them on the computer screen. If they're in isolation, if they are phonetically inconsistent, you simply cannot sound it out. Now, some what happens is the reading theorist said, okay, well those words that can't be sounded out must be learned at sight. They must be learned at sight. That's absolute nonsense. In fact, think about it. The kids who are 3, 4, 5, let's say 4, 5, 6, who can read, oh look, mommy says McDonald's. Oh, look at that. It says Carvel. Take those words and put them in isolation, they're not going to be able to read them. But how can they read McDonald's? Because it's in a context. Huh? They have a semantic cue to help them. So instead of putting words on walls, uh, let children see meaningful text. And that brings me to my absolute favorite word to start, favorite way of teaching youngsters to read. And I think I'm going to have an agreement on you with this one, with you on this one. The language experience approach. The language experience approach, which I believe
Yeah.
should be the way all children have their first reading experience. Right? Their first reading experience should be parents, caregivers teach reading to them at home, of course. Okay, like Jim Trelease says in the Read Aloud Handbook. But once they start getting formal instruction, let them do language experience. The undergirding philosophy of language experiences What I can think, I can say. What I can say, I can write, or have someone write for me. And when I
Uh-huh.
write, I can read. So what you're doing is you're starting out with your tell me something. Yeah, we went into the pool, went into the pool the other day, me and my brother, and we had a good time. And we had a tube, and we did a lot of swimming. Yeah, okay. And the teacher in kindergarten, the youngster can't write that. So the teacher acts as a scribe, as it's called, writes that story in what I like the hardcover books that are blank. They're called blank books. It really appears like a book. The teacher writes it, and then the kid has to, quote, read it. Now, how is he going to be able to read it if he's never seen those words before? Because he just said it. So, as the name of the story is, and the teacher asks him, our, our swimming pool. And the teacher points to the words, and little by little, the youngster will get them just based upon the context. Now, is he sort of just memorizing the story? Of course. But you do that enough, and he starts to get two ideas that you want children to have. Number one, reading is all about getting meaning. Huh?
Yeah.
It's all about getting meaning. And then you don't go right over to the next story. You go over that one a lot until he can read it. In fact, even when you point to words individually, he'll be able or she'll be able to read the word because he's had so much experience, and not because well, it's become a sight word. Well, of course, it's become a sight word because he's seen it a lot. He's seen it a lot in a meaningful context. And in my view, we're really talking about going from mediated word identification, which is when you have to sound it out letter by letter, to immediate. And immediate word identification happens very simply. The way all things in life happen immediately when you do it over and over and over again. Now, in meaningful context. In meaningful context. Uh, so again, language experience, I've seen kids, and I work with kids. Friendly, I'm such an advocate of professional development, good professional development, and unfortunately, in this country, we only give teachers six credits, nine in some universities, and we certify them to teach reading. I'm sorry, to teaching elementary school. Uh, ridiculous, ridiculous. Uh, when I did the reading program at Dowling College, when I walked in, it was an 1818 master's degree. And I told the dean, we're going to have to change this. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want 33 credits required and one elective. You'll never get that through. I said, well, let me see if I can get it through, and I got it through. Very simple. All I had is was the professors who this is a personal college. We like choice. I said, yeah, but if you're a youngster who's in third grade, who's having rather difficulty reading, who do you want? Which reading specialist do you want working with him? The one with 11 courses in reading, or the one with two? Oh, okay. So it became a 33 required credits, friend. 33 required the master's degree. Okay. And three electives. And our graduates became incredibly in demand on Long Island because they knew their stuff. Would I like to see undergraduate universities and colleges require 12, 15, 18 credits, even 21 credits in reading literacy? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a biggie.
All I know is that this different methods, and we're going to get to why Johnny can't read in a few minutes,
Uh-huh.
and transactional reader theory responses. That I know that I listened. I was in the restaurant the other day, and this child was reading, and I was saying, and she was reading fluently, and I said, "Could you tell me?" It was interesting. What did you read? No idea.
Yeah.
I said, that's because you're reading words and you're not hearing what they're saying.
Right.
I said, now, don't read them out loud. Read them to yourself and hear the words.
Right.
Hear what the words are, then say it out loud. Then I started to question her. And the mother sat there. She says, I don't believe you did that.
Yeah.
I said, because when they're teaching the science of reading, it's fluency. It's not comprehension. And it's like I said, you're not here to have speed reading. You have to read the way you speak, not the way whatever. So
Well, that's
that's
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let
A
me know.
lot of teachers have no idea what they're doing. The program is required. I know from my friends that are teaching in
Yeah,
my school, and they said what exactly, and they explain what they're doing, different versions of the same program. I said, but you have children that are autistic.
yeah.
You have children that are ADHD. You can't do the work with them the same way. You need to adapt. And I started to say, if the principal needs some help, I'll do a Zoom. I'll explain it. But what can I say?
Well,
So
Fred,
here we go to
well,
reading wars too.
yes, yes, we will. But that takes me back to another. I'll just do
Yeah,
this in two sentences, which is really hard for me. But,
yeah,
but Brandon, in my view, the bottom line is it's really never programs. It's
yeah,
always teacher knowledge base. That's why we invest trillions of millions, sorry, millions of dollars in programs. Every 5 years we change them in this country. Some like new and improved. That's how you sell toothpaste. That's how we sell reading programs. It's new and improved the science of reading. I'll give me a break, okay? If we invest in teaching teachers
yeah.
how the process works, the process
Uh-huh.
hasn't changed. Right? To say, oh, well, we don't like the three queuing systems, give me a break. That's like saying we don't like how language works. Get any one of 100 linguists in the world. Anyway, everyone will say those three queuing systems are embedded in all meaningful text. Okay, Rudolph Flesch, why Johnny can't read.
Okay, all I can tell you is that when I taught every grade, I got in trouble a lot because
Uh-huh.
I refused to use the reader. I said I'll use the reader if it has like a Grimm's fairy tale or if it has something that had meaning. Otherwise, I had Beverly Cleary, Mary Pope. I had To Kill a Mockingbird, which got me in real trouble
Yeah.
in the sixth grade. Oh, I got tons of trouble with that one.
It's more
They
trouble
wouldn't let.
today, friend.
Yeah, I know. I did something that the principal wanted to kill me, but the kids loved it.
Right,
I said, I realize that the man that's been tried is black. What about if we have the man is white and we have a black jury?
right.
And they loved it, but I got in trouble for that one. But I didn't care.
Well,
I
you're a real iconoclast,
yeah,
right? You
yeah.
were you really were without sounding patronizing. You really were ahead of your time. As a voracious reader, you just knew that you got your love from reading, not from workbooks. You got your love from reading by reading books. Am I
They were these kids were geniuses. They had IQs that were higher than most adults ever would have.
right?
So
Yes.
then we did Shakespeare. We did short stories. We did all sorts of things that I just said to my principal, look, you gave me this class to punish me because I did a great job with first grade. So he punished me for like 2 more years and then gave me first grade to see if I could do the same thing with them.
Well,
Could I
no
say?
15 goes unpunished, friend. You know that.
I think when you do the right when you do a good job, it's no good. So that when I taught the first grade, there was a transitional program for kids that got left back in first grade.
Right.
So in January, 8 of them went to second grade,
There you
and
go.
then I got really punished because the kids turned around and said, "She's going to teach second grade. We'll teach her how." I go like, for double grade. So now we have the reading wars. It's to find the dispute over the best way to teach reading is being carried out by advocates of phonics whole language approaches to teaching reading. So what is it that they're trying to prove in these reading wars? We have Shaw and we have Fletch and we have a whole bunch of other people. So what exactly are they trying to do? And
Okay.
are they actually trying to do it?
Yeah. Well, I have to just go back a tiny bit. Um, the in 1898, actually, a fellow named Edmund Burke Huey wrote a book called The Psychology and Pedagogy of Reading. Probably the best book I've ever read on the
Uh-huh.
reading. Okay, and I just found out recently that my mentor when I did my PhD in reading psycholinguistics at Hofstra was H. Allen Robinson, past president of the International Reading Association. I just reading an article about him. I believe he's deceased, H. Allen Robinson, but he said he read that book 5 times at different points in his career, and he never read a better book about reading in his life.
I still have it.
Yeah, right.
I still have it.
We both have. We both love that book. in that book, actually, Edmund Burke Huey talks about uh, giving kids things like this. Dan ran. Dan ran to the tan van. Dan ran to the tan van to get the, and Huey points out, why do we give children sentence hash like this? This is sentence hash. Let's give them meaningful stuff to read. Huh? So he was not anti-phonics. In fact, he said we should teach phonics. How about this for an avant-garde? That was his dissertation, by the way. It was published in 1903 as The Psychology and Pedagogy of Reading. But he said, what about this? Um, most proficient readers read orally, read silently. Why don't we have a what what was around at the time was a silent reading hypothesis where children don't engage in any oral reading, total silent reading, which again, I think is a little too avant-garde for me. However, after third grade, why do we have children do all of this oral reading, especially the ones who are proficient at it? Because as a as proficient readers, they can do mostly silent reading. Now, if they're reading poems or they're reading plays, they're meant to be read out loud. No problem. But otherwise, let them read silently. Now, the problem is if the youngster can't break the code, if the youngster can't decode print, you need to, diagnostically, you need to hear him read out loud. So if you have the knowing ear, and I mean that literally, if you have and the knowing ear, I've studied reading all my life. I'm sorry, all of my adult life, and I've developed a knowing ear. When I hear a youngster read orally, if he's a deficient reader, I will have him read a passage silently. I'll ask him a question.
Yeah.
I'll have him read it orally. But when he's reading it orally, I'll listen to, as Ken Goodman said, I'll listen to his miscues. I'll see
Mhm.
if he reads, the farmer went to the fram, fram, and then he um, milked the uh, crows, crows, friend. From that one sentence, I say to myself, this is easy. This child is overutilizing graphophonic cues and
Mhm.
underutilizing semantic cues. Right? He doesn't self-monitor. Right? He should be thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So if you're using oral reading as a diagnostic tool, it's wonderful. But with the caveat, you have to have the knowing ear. That's what people who poo-poo miscue analysis, oh, stop. So when you listen to a youngster's miscues, if you know how to analyze them, you're learning an awful lot. Students have to, as you said before, self-monitor. The youngster who was reading fluently and everything, that he had no clue what he was reading, we call them a word caller. But by the way, in school, his teacher, second grade teacher, might say he's one of the best readers in the class. No,
Mhm.
no, he's one of the best decoders in the class, right? Then from Edmund Burke Huey, then we moved to Rudolf Flesch. And in 1955, Rudolf Flesch wrote Why Johnny Can't Read
Yeah.
Much and What You Can Do About It. Very simple thesis. Very simple. Children in this country are 3 years below, on average, of the children in Europe. I looked up that statistic. I couldn't get any confirmation,
Yeah.
by the way. But anyway, uh, uh, because we are not teaching enough phonics. Rudolf Flesch, interesting background, by the way. I in no way, shape, or form can I denigrate this man. He was brilliant. He came from Austria. He was trained in Austria in law and linguistics. Came to this country uh, to, of course, get out of the Nazi occupation, and he studied linguistics and I'm sorry, phonetics phonetics, and one of the area that's escaping me at the moment that's closely related. And he got a PhD from Columbia, and that's then after that PhD, he wrote Why Johnny Can Read. And as I said, the book is a treatise. We both have shared it. I think I've read it numerous times. You have as well. But the thesis was very simple. Johnny, and today we say Johnny and Jill to be more politically correct and actually more fair. But white children can't read, and riddle questions because we're not doing enough phonics. And then he spends 150, 180 pages talking about the phonic rules we should be teaching youngsters. didn't really, he's not so big on the rules per se, but he is very big on children learning the different sounds, the blends, the digraphs, the diphthongs that make up the language. The one thing, by the way, a lot of that book, Why Johnny Can't Read, brilliant. But so much of it, friend, go through that book. I would challenge people. Go through that book and see if you can find the word comprehension. See if you can find the word meaning. Rudolph seems to have this idea, or Dr. Flesh seems to have the idea that once you can break the code, the meaning takes care of itself. No, 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 sir. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. The it has to be a priori. It has to be first and foremost all about meaning. Now, is phonics a way to get at the meaning? Of course, of course. I love when Huey said phonics should be taught, but never should be called reading. It should be taught separate from reading because we want kids to know that yeah, that's important. But the real important thing is when you're looking at a book with meaningful text. I really like that kind of bifurcation. Yeah, it made sense. With no one grabbed on that. Okay, so that Why Johnny Can't Read, it became a New York Times bestseller list for I don't know how many years. I, why? Because it seemed to be a simple solution. Teach phonics, and all of our kids will be like the kids in Spain and Italy and Germany, where they're reading above grade level. Brent, little something interesting here. In Spanish and Italian, there are one-to-one relationships between the graphemes and the phonemes. If there are five graphemes, they match up with five phonemes. They have the words sound out perfectly in Spanish and Italian. Perfectly. Now, in English, we have 26 letters, as we all know, 26 letters trying to make 44 sounds. That doesn't work. That's why we have words like caught and said and through and though. And all of those words are phonetically inconsistent. They don't have those kinds of words in Spanish or Italian because the words have one-to-one relationships between the letters and the sounds. There was a movement, by the way, to change English to make it that way. I probably would have joined with that, but that was a little bit too avant-garde. But as I said, Rudolph Flesch makes some good points in the book. I wouldn't even argue with him about the importance of phonics. However, he totally disregards reading. I'm sorry, disregards comprehension blatantly, blatantly. And it's almost as if, as I said, when they learn to decode, when they learn, he doesn't use the word decode, when they learn phonics, all they will be great readers. You talked about one in the first 5 minutes. That youngster had a good background knowledge in phonics, or he didn't. He was an early reader, whatever. Uh, but if he doesn't understand what he reads, I'd never say he's a good reader. That's ridiculous. I'd say he's a proficient decoder. He's a word caller. You know what? We have to get in there and show him what reading's all about. He's developed a incorrect theoretical orientation to reading. I wrote a doctoral dissertation on this topic. Why do some kids develop that where they think reading the words is fine as long as you read the words correct and you sound good and you're fluent? Why? Because we reward it in first, second, third grade. Priscilla, would you read? And she read. And Peter and Joey went to the store. When he was at the store, he bought some groceries. And after he bought some groceries, he went home. And mom put them in bags, and mom took them out of the bags, and then she put them in the refrigerator. And then mom said, "You did a great job shopping." And she said, "You are a great reader." Well, you know what? If we constantly say that when kids sound fluent, huh, they start. Everyone in the class starts getting these ideas. Oh, good readers are readers who sound fluent and read all the words correct. Now, am I saying the teacher should denigrate? Of course not. But how about the teacher says that was that was really good. You really sounded good there, Sally, Joey, Miguel. You really sounded great. Tell me about what it said. Tell me about what it said. If and Fred, you know, infrequently that happens in American schools.
Yeah.
Kids are kids are taught implicitly. They're taught implicitly. that reading is all about sounding fluent and getting all the words right. Huh? And then that'll get them through first and second grade pretty well. But they get to third grade with consonant area text, all of a sudden the sounding fluent doesn't make it. When you have the questions at the end of the chapter, et cetera, and you have to take more technical vocabulary. Huh? So Burrow Flesh, 1955, interesting book. He missed a major point. And he had a PhD in phonetics, by the way,
Yeah, I know.
and linguistics. Right? But he must have missed that whole point about meaning. Meaning being the sine qua non. That's the only thing I know in Latin. That took 2 years. That which cannot be done without. That which cannot be done without. You have to know that reading is all about getting meaning. Is phonics a part of getting to there? Yes. And last thing, friend, and I want you to jump in, but uh, well, you did ask me about the reading wars.
We have about 5 more minutes.
Uh, well, the reading wars was Gene Shaw. Gene
Yeah,
Shaw read a Gene Shaw is a professor at Harvard. I met her at she came to Harvard to
I think I read her book.
yeah her book
I did read her book.
reading the Great Debate. Yes, reading
Yeah, I did. The five kinds of whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And Gene Shaw basically was building on the uh, extracting information from the longitudinal first grade studies by Bond and Dykstra, where they looked at reading programs across the country. Some that used linguistic techniques, clustering techniques. Some that used pure phonics. Some that used sight words. The sight words of sight word programs sounded like this: Jane and Joe ran. Jane and Joe ran. Uh, Sally ran. They ran to the field. And it's repeating over and over and over the same words. That, that's but anyway, that would be called a whole word approach. By the way, whole word approach is not synonymous with whole language. For some bizarre reason, they got intertwined. I'm not sure. Okay, so why did I actually do this study? It was a 6, 7 year study. And you know what they found? Well, they found that 60% of the readers will read regardless of program. 60% of children in grades 1 through 4 will learn to read on grade level regardless of program. 40% won't. And the government wasn't too happy with that. It's called cooperative first grade studies. The government said, hmm, can you rework those statistics? They said, sure. And they brought in their statistician. He said, wait a minute. We found for something that made more of a difference than one would think. The teacher. Some teachers, even those who switch programs from this one to that one, from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, still had
the
who's
whole bunch here.
that study basically showed that the teacher, don't you love this? Teachers out there, don't you love this? That the teacher is the most important factor in helping kids learn to read. The teacher, not the program, the teacher, and I would add to that the teacher's knowledge base from
Yeah,
coursework, or some people like yourself just had a intuitive knowledge of how it should work. So Gene Shaw wrote The Great Debate. The Great Debate was nothing more than how do you teach reading? You teach reading at sight or phonics. And lastly, friend, when I met with Jean Shaw, she was a lovely woman. She was very nice. I finished my dissertation. I thought I was meeting with her because she was going to ask me questions about it. She didn't. She came in. She was lovely. She couldn't be sweeter. She said, "All right, young man." At the time, I was a young man. All right, young man. What do you think about me? What do you think about it? I said, "I'm sorry. What do I think about mom?" She said, the debate." I said, "Oh, you're talking about the Great Debate, your book? Because you've read it." I said several times. I said, "I think it's a very interesting book, and I think it made some excellent points." He goes, "Come on, young man, you look like you're being kind of dancing around this." So I said, "Well, may I be honest?" She said, "Sure." I said, "Dr. Shaw, I think you asked the wrong question. I think you asked the wrong question. How do you teach reading at sight or phonetically?" It's, in my view, it's the wrong question. The whole point is we know there are 3 language cueing systems embedded in all meaningful print. So we should teach youngsters how to flexibly use all 3 of those cueing systems. All 3. Graphophonics, semantics, and tactic. And if we do that, Are all students going to be on grade level? No, because they come to school with different background knowledge.
That's right.
As Hawkins said in his book on intelligence, that background knowledge is critically important. So, so Gene Shaw again used the word from the work of Bondage in the first grade studies to coin the term the great debate, and that's still continuing to the present. And if I may just lastly, I'm sure we're running out of time, but when you know how students go from recognizing words like the ass, basket, uh, um, tr, that trumpet. How do they go from that to getting them automatically? Simple. By seeing them a lot. The same way you go about recognizing people in your family, friends, because you've seen them a lot. But once you've seen a lot, you recognize automatically. They become, if I may, sight word people. All right, I'm being a little facetious here. Huh? Uh, uh,
You
I
know what?
I don't play an instrument, but when I look at people playing, reading music, I say, are they really looking at all those little music notes on the page and processing every single one? I've talked to many musicians. No way. They can't do that. It's impossible. What they do is they see patterns. Huh? They see patterns. And the more they see them, the easier it is to just decipher them. That's kind of what Hawkins was talking about in his book.
Oh, there we are. Okay, so next time we're going to get to SQ3R because
Okay.
we didn't get to that whole language and the other ones. But I have to be honest. The president, in his infinite wacko, whatever, has decided that he doesn't want children to be segregated or talked about or allow them to show that their differences in their heritage. And I find that horrible. Maybe it's just me. And before I end, I did have a class of different kids all over the world, which was fun. And I said to them, I don't know anything about where you come from. Why don't we have one day every month where everybody shares? They bought food too. And you know what? What he wants to do is terrible because everybody's different and kids come from whatever. But this has been fun. And the next one we're going to do SQ3R. You have whole language, and we have another six to do. And I'm noticing that a lot of kids are reading, but they're just reading words.
Yeah.
So comprehension and text comprehension is important. And I know from my niece that's learning fluency, and I said, and she's in first grade, I said, Grace Marie, don't read like you're waiting on a train. Read like you're here. But anyway, everyone, it's a beautiful day. Dr. Cavuto, this is fun.
Friend, the time flies when we're together. It was a pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
You taught me everything. As a matter of fact, they asked me the other day, two of the authors said, how come you know the questions so well and with the book? I said, you can blame it on my reading professor. He taught me how to get the meaning of what I'm reading.
Wasn't it just yesterday that you were my student at Lehman College in the Bronx?
Yeah.
It seems like just yesterday.
I just posted something on there. They did. They posted something at Lehman for people that graduated. They wanted to know what happened. So I explained to them why. And everybody's reading, like, oh, really? Oh, really? That's great. Because they just said, I graduated. I said, but I really graduated because I actually earned the degree.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
everybody, it's going to rain. It's a beautiful day. Thank you so much. August 4th, we have the next one.
Looking forward to it, friend. And and I wish you the best of luck with all of the wonderful authors that you are
Thank you. Yes.
so good at interviewing. I watch them, and you're incredible.
I'm going to be on Thursday with the author of City of Magicians. It's scary. On Monday, if he remembers to open up his alarm clock, it's a true story about a Vietnam soldier that came back with PTSD,
Oh, that
came
sounds
saving Casey. And on the New York Times author on Wednesday, Brian Silverman, and I'm booked till October 31st.
wonderful.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. So, everybody, have a great day. Stay safe and bye.
Thank you much.
Now I have to figure out how to do this. I don't know why this does it to me. Okay, I could do that.
Come here. Don't you come here.
Oh, I